looking here at gross margin, I have it pink, and pink is bad. So basically it's comparing it to 50%, which is the target gross margin, and it's saying, okay, it's below the target, that means it's bad, make it pink, which makes sense. This is perfect. Hey guys, welcome to another video. The Financial Controller here. Today I'm going to show you how to build a KPI dashboard to run an entire business. And the reason why I deliver KPIs to executives is because executives by nature are super busy, and you want to give them some numbers that quickly give them an idea on how the business is doing. So we're going to jump into my computer here, and I'm going to show you the KPI dashboard that I built here. So as you can see, this is super easy to read, right? This is color coded. When it's pink, it's bad. When it's green, it's good. Big tiles, big fonts. You can go up here and go to the month and change it. So right now, this is June of 2021. I can easily click on a drop-down menu and choose March of 2021, so I can compare the actual results for revenue compared to budget, compared to prior month, and it's all driven by formulas, so that basically when you change the source data, you can change all of these results right here. So I'm going to show you how to read it, how to build it, coming right up in this video. Alright, so the structure of today's video is that it's made up of 3 segments. The first segment, I'm going to show you how to read this KPI dashboard. So if you're an executive and you receive this from someone on your finance team, how do you read it and make sense of it? That's going to be the first segment. And in the second segment, I'm going to show you how to populate it. So if you work in finance and you have this KPI or a similar KPI dashboard, how do you go about populating the data on a monthly basis, right? So an easy way that you can just like layer in the data, and then the KPI dashboard will basically update itself, right? And then the third segment of the video, I'm going to show you how to build the KPI dashboard, right? So if you want to build this from scratch, I'm going to show you step by step what Excel functions go into and the design ideas that go into creating such KPI dashboard. But also, if you want to take the easier route, this Excel template along with instruction videos on how to create it, modify it, and troubleshoot it is going to be available for sale on my website. I'm going to leave a link down below. Alright, first let's take a look and learn how to read this KPI dashboard. So jumping right in, when you look at this KPI dashboard right off the bat, you can see that it's broken up to 2 sections. So the first one is profit and loss, and the second one is balance sheet, right? So you can see here these 5 KPIs or metrics are profit and loss, and these here 6 or 7 KPIs are going to be balance sheets. And what I chose here for the profit and loss KPIs is revenue, gross margin, customer churn as a percentage of revenue, operating expenses, and then customer acquisition costs. These are the ones that I found relevant to profit and loss. You can add to that, and you can create things like net income growth or year-over-year growth in the revenue or net income. You can get creative and add as many as you want. Then for the balance sheet, what I found most relevant and most helpful to my executives is going to be DSO or days sales outstanding, DPO, days payable outstanding, non-current AR, which is the amount of accounts receivable balance that's past due, and then cash changes, cash balance at month end compared to budget and prior month. And then the ratios that I find most helpful are going to be the current ratio, because that looks at current assets and current liabilities and gives you a snapshot into what's going on in terms of the ability of the company to pay off its current obligations. And then debt to equity ratio, that's going to be more of a long-term view of how the company is financing its equity. And then the interest coverage ratio, which is the ability of the company to generate net income to cover its interest payment on the servicing of its current loans. Alright, so now let's go ahead and read this together. So we're looking at the month here on top. This is the month of February 2021, right? And it's really helpful up here to just tell the reader like a legend, like a color legend, to say, when it's green, it means that it's good, so it means target. When it's pink, it's off target, right? So then when the reader goes in and say, okay, we are looking at the month of February 2021, revenue, right away, you can tell here revenue is pink. That means it's bad, right? So why is it bad? Because when you look at the revenue budget is 2.4 million. We only did 2.2 million, right? So it's lower than budget. But also as a point of reference, you have versus prior months. So versus prior months, 2 million in prior months. So there's a little bit of growth over prior months. So the 2 points of reference here is going to be revenue in the budgets and then revenue in the prior months. And the same concept applies to all of these KPIs. Basically, when it's green, it means that it's good. So for gross margin, we actually did better than budget. So we have 51% compared to 50%. And then prior months was actually 55%. So we went down a bit from prior months, but still we beat the budget or the target. So we have a green tile for gross margin. and so on and so forth, right? So I'm not going to bore you by going through each one of these, but basically very helpful here is to provide some kind of definition. So for example, if you're showing customer churn as a percentage of revenue, you define it here a bit. So like this is lost revenue divided by total revenue, right? So the reader knows what you're measuring here. So this is the lost revenue. 1% of revenue was lost, or 1.1% of revenue was lost, right? If the definition of your KPI is longer than just one sentence, like for example, when we scroll down here and we come to DSO, what I like to do is create a link in the Excel file, and I'm going to go through a little bit later in the video and show you how to create this link so that when the reader clicks on the link, it basically takes them to where this is. So this is a table here where I have, what is days sales outstanding DSO? It's the number of days it takes to convert sales to cash. What's the formula? And then, how to interpret this. So basically the industry standard where we are is 30 to 45 days. So basically if you flip back to the dashboard, the number of days we're looking at here is 37. So here the target for DSO is 35. That's why we have a pink tile for DSO. So as you can see, it's relatively easy to read the KPI dashboard. You need to make it as easy as possible, provide definitions and links if it's something that's more involved and requires more understanding of what the KPI is trying to do, to give a little bit more context to the reader into what you're showing them. All right, now let's take a look on how to populate this KPI dashboard. And let me just say here that a good KPI dashboard is one that you can update monthly with ease, right? So that you can just go in and copy and paste your financial information into one of the tabs, and then it gets pulled in with a formula into the KPI dashboard, right? So for example, here I'm gonna jump in and show you. If you can see at the bottom of my Excel file, there is a flow from number 1, 2, and 3. So number 1 is data. Tab number 2 here is staging, and then 3 is the dashboard. So in tab number 1, the data, it should be as easy as layering in your income statement. So basically here I'm entering the income statement data, revenue, cost of goods sold, gross profit, operating expenses, and I'm entering it for the month, right? So these are for the month of January, February, all the way to August of 2021. And then the same goes down here, all the financial information for the income statement. And then I have my data from the balance sheet. So this is the cash, AR, past due AR, inventory, current assets. Basically, it should be as easy as grabbing this data here from whatever you're using, QuickBooks or Xero or NetSuite, any of your ERPs, and pasting this data here to populate the KPI dashboard. After you put in the balance sheet information, you put in your targets. So I have here revenue budget, operating expenses budget, and then I set up my targets for the rest of the KPIs. And basically, these targets here is something that you can decide with your team. So you need to have a sit down with your team and come up with what do you want to be your, for example, target churn percentage. So a churn is the amount of customers or revenue that you lost when you lose customers. You want to come up with a percentage that is acceptable for you and your company. So for example, if you want to accept 10% loss of your customer revenue, that's bad, right? So you want to have something more ambitious and aggressive, maybe 1% of revenue lost for losing customers, right? So you basically go ahead and define what the targets should be with your teammates for DSO. This is days sales outstanding. I set it up here to be 35 because this is the industry that I'm in, but you guys can look and decide in your industry, manufacturing, distribution, software, whatever it is, and come up with the acceptable amount of days sales outstanding. DPO, and then obviously for DPO, if you're choosing that as one of the KPIs, this is the number of days that it takes you from receiving invoices from vendors to paying them. So you want that number to be higher than your DSO, right? You want to collect a little faster and take a little longer to pay so you can improve your working capital. So that's the idea here, is you can come up with the targets based on your discussions with your team, looking at industry average, Googling stuff, just figuring out what is the best target here to look forward to on each of these KPIs. All right, now let's talk about how to build the KPI dashboard, right? So if you want to build it from scratch and you have a blank slate, an Excel file, and you want to go ahead and build it, how do you do that? So there are two aspects to building a KPI dashboard like this. The first one is design. So I'm going to go through the design choices that I had to go through in order to come up with this. And then secondly, the Excel functions. So this is the two major components we're going to talk about now. First design, and then Excel functions The Excel functions are going to be things like index match. So I'm going to show you how to do index match on 2 criteria instead of 1 criteria, because I'll show you why you need 2 criterias lookup in this case. One is the date and one is the KPI. So it's an index match with 2 criteria. And then we'll look at conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is what gives the KPI the color, whether pink for bad or green for good. That's conditional formatting. It's pretty easy and straightforward. I'll show you that. And then drop-down menus. So how do you create a drop-down menu? Pretty easy. Data validation to create a drop-down menu so the user can just select one of the values from, for example, month drop-down menu. And then links. I'm going to show you how to create a link. Pretty straightforward functions in Excel. Links are helpful for definitions of KPIs. If you don't want to define the entire thing in one cell, you can just add a link and define it somewhere else in the Excel file. So you can click on the link and go there. So this is the 2 aspects, design and Excel functions. We'll take a look at this right now. All right, let's look at the design and the design choices that I had to go through when I was making this KPI dashboard. So the first one is the choice of the KPIs. Which KPIs do I want to show my executives? So you can borrow ideas from me and look at what I'm doing here and take ideas. For example, I'm showing revenue, gross margin, churn, customer churn, days sales outstanding, current ratio. You can take these ideas and maybe implement it yourself, or you can also look at some other KPIs that are more important to the business, so that you can, be creative, choosing from this or coming up with your own KPIs. So choice of KPIs is number 1. Number 2 is the data flow. I'm going to show you how the data flows in this KPI file from tab to tab, right? And then third is the font, color, and tile style. And this is basically making it easy for the reader to kind of read what's going on the KPI dashboard. So let's jump right in and look at the choice of KPIs. So in this case, I have profit and loss KPIs and balance sheets. And for me and my business, I found most relevant to be revenue, gross margin, customer churn as a percentage of revenue, and then OPEX, operating expenses, comparing that to budget, and then customer acquisition costs. Customer acquisition cost obviously is the dollar amount that it costs you to acquire one customer, right? So it's taking all of the expenses associated with sales and marketing and dividing it by the number of customers you acquired in a period, right? So that gives you the average cost per customer. And then on the balance sheet side, obviously I have days sales outstanding. We talked about it before. This is the number of days it takes to convert sales into cash. So this is pretty important. Right next to it, I like to put DPO, days payable outstanding, and I would like to have the 2 right next to each other so that the executive can see that there's a time gap, right? It takes me 48 days to pay and 37 days to collect, right? So you want to have a gap between the 2, and you want to have the gap in the favor of the DPO so that you are collecting faster in 37 days and paying out the vendors a little slower in 48 days. And then I have non-current AR percentage. So this is basically important for me in my business. I want to make sure that I don't have a lot of accounts receivable that is past due, that we're always doing what we can to collect our AR faster. And that's why this number is here. And then I have cash, and obviously cash is king. So I think in any KPI dashboard, you want to have cash so that the reader can see the performance in terms of how much cash is on hand versus what was the target on the prior month. And then I have current ratio, which basically just shows the the ability of the business to meet its current obligations. So I have here as much as 2.5x the current assets divided by current liabilities, so that the company is actually here in the green, is able to meet its current liabilities. And then I have debt to equity ratio, and basically here's a definition for it as well. You can click on it and see. And this is basically the relative proportion of shareholders' equity in debt used to finance the company's assets, right? So in this case here, the company has 2.7. So the proportion of financing that the company is using to purchase its assets divided between debt and equity is 2.7 as much debt used more than equity to finance the company's assets, right? So this is a really good KPI to include here as well. And then interest coverage ratio is good when you have long-term loans, so that you know right off the bat, if you have net income, that's enough to cover your interest payments. So on a monthly basis, in this company here, I'm making 6 times the amount of interest in net income. So this is really good, right? So this is a good KPI to include. So this is the choice of the KPIs I included. Again, these are my choices as a controller of the company. You can make your own choices, come up with what's important to you and your business. So this is as far as the choice of KPIs. All right, now let's take a look at the flow of data, how the data flows in my file from tab to tab and then finally on the dashboard. So the way I decided to design it is to have 3 tabs here: the data tab flowing into the staging tab, and then that flows into the dashboard itself, right? So the reason why I separate into 3 tabs and not just like 2, because the other way to do this also is 2 tabs, just a data tab right into the dashboard. The reason why I did this is because I want a tab here dedicated to data alone, right? So this is the data tab. I want to be able to dump data into it, not have formulas, right? So just copy and paste data and not have any formulas in there that can interfere with me just pasting data into the tab. And then in the next step over in the staging tab, that's where I have my formulas, right? That's where I calculate my KPIs. So for example, just to give you a practical example, when we look at the data tab, I'm just pasting here my revenue data, COGS, and gross profit, right? So nothing to do here, no formulas here, just data. I'm just pasting data. And then that's gonna flow into the tab right next to the staging tab. In the staging tab, my choice here is to do the actual calculation here. So for example, I have revenue. Revenue here is being picked up using an index match formula. If you look up here in the formula bar, I have an index match that's pulling in the revenue number. So this is all formula based. The entire section here is formula based, the entire tab. And I'm doing my calculation of the gross margin, which is one of the KPIs that I'm measuring right in here. So it's real simple, right? So I'm using one tab here for data. So I'm just pasting my income statement and balance sheet data at the end of each month, right? This is very simple. And then in the staging tab, that's where I'm doing my index match to bring in the revenue number and the gross profit. So I can go ahead and calculate and say, okay, gross margin is gross profit divided by revenue, right? So this is for me a simpler way to pull in the data. And then once I pulled it in and I calculate gross margin, then in the final tab or the dashboard, that's where I'm pulling in the gross margin, right? So I'm doing an index match here that says, you know, look up gross margin value along with looking up the value of the month, because we are in February of 2021. Look up the values in the staging tab for February 2021 and gross margin and bring it in here, right? Same thing for the target. I'm doing a formula that says bring in the target from the staging tab and bring in the month, right? So then this index match formula is bringing in the value based on the 2 criteria that I'm saying, which is target, gross margin, and the month February 2021. So this is basically the flow of data. It flows from data tab right into the staging tab, right into the dashboard, and that's how I decided to build it. Now, in terms of design of the visuals of the KPI dashboard, I decided to use tiles for it. So if you look here, I have a tile for each of the KPIs. So I have a tile for revenue, I have one for gross margin, and one for each of these, so that when the reader is looking at this, they can immediately and easily visually see each of the KPIs separated from the next in its own tile, and they can see the actual result compared to the budget, compared to the prior months, right, in one tile. So this makes it easier for the reader to kind of easy look at this and realize what's going on with revenue, what's going on with gross margin. Then the second design choice here is the color coding. So basically, if you see here, I have pink and I have green. Pink is bad, green is good. And I have here the legend on top that says green equals meet target and pink equals off target. So the reader can immediately see what's going on. When they look at this for the month of February, they know that the results are mixed. Some stuff is coming in red, which is revenue. We're doing a little bit less in revenue, but some stuff is coming in green, gross margin. We're doing a little bit better than the budget. Customer churn, we're doing also a little bit better than target. So basically here, this is easy to read. Tiles, color coding makes it super easy for the reader to look and see what's going on.